Welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson. Today we're going to talk about Alzheimer's disease, and believe it or not, a hopeful way, perhaps for the very first time, because you're going to hear good news when up until now the situation has been pretty bleak. The Bredesen protocol is a treatment that actually works. Just ask Sally Weinrich, just one of many success stories. These days, 69-year-old Sally Weinrich smiles almost all the time, ever since her Alzheimer's symptoms reversed.
Life is good. I like being able to remember, to connect the dots, because I've experienced the absence of thinking, and that is scary.
Her husband, Martin, equally overjoyed.
She has come back.
Sally's not alone. Hundreds of patients with mild to moderate cognitive impairment experienced never-before-seen improvements thanks to a revolutionary treatment developed by Dr. Dale Bredesen.
Alzheimer's disease is no longer a mystery. You don't have to say, we don't know why you get it, we don't know what to do about it. We do know why you get it, we do know what to do about it, and we know how to prevent it.
After 30 years of research, Dr. Bredesen is sharing his treatment in the book, The End of Alzheimer's, as well as in medical journals. Sally and Martin sensed trouble when she began forgetting things, like her grandchildren's names and her purse at the grocery. A test confirmed early stages of Alzheimer's.
It was a total sense of hopelessness. A wish to die and not want to live, because as a nurse, I've cared for Alzheimer's patients, and I also have had family members who I love dearly who've had advanced Alzheimer's and who died from Alzheimer's, in fact.
So, of course, I was scared.
Martin, a scientific researcher, scoured the internet for help. He found Dr. Bredesen's protocol and got Sally on board.
You don't want to wait until it's very late in the game. The earlier the better, and the more likely you're going to see dramatic improvements.
Sally got what Dr. Bredesen calls a cognoscopy, blood work, genetic tests, and more to identify where she was when it came to Alzheimer's 36 causes.
All of us should have a cognoscopy when we get to 45 or more, just as we get a colonoscopy when we're 50. Everybody knows that.
Sally's results pinpointed specific areas of concern.
Each person's program is different, so we developed a computerized algorithm so that you can look at all the different contributors for each person, identify.
The next step for Sally, tailor-made treatment that zeroes in on where she needs improvement. In her case, that meant certain medicines, vitamins, and supplements, more sleep, less stress. Sally eats a mildly ketogenic diet as part of her treatment. That means no sugar and very few other carbohydrates.
When I am ketogenic, my brain thinks clearer than when I'm not ketogenic.
Sally eliminated exposure to certain toxins like mold and pesticides, addressed hidden infections in her body, and much more.
I have not gone to town and forgotten my pocketbook since I've started this program. Hallelujah, because I need my credit card.
It takes typically 3 to 6 months, but we see unprecedented improvements in their scores, in their ability to go back to work, interact with their families, increases in their hippocampal volumes, things like that.
So while genetics mean an estimated 75 million Americans are predisposed to Alzheimer's, like Sally Weinrich, Dr. Dale Bredesen says they no longer have to fear being tested, because now there's something they can do about it.
The fear is pretty much gone. The doubt is pretty much gone. And that's the real Sally. That's who God and Dale Bredesen have given back to me.
And we're delighted to be joined by Dr. Dale Bredesen. Welcome.
Thanks, Lori.
So it must be very gratifying to see patients like Sally have a reversal of her symptoms of Alzheimer's. How many other patients like Sally have you been able to help?
So there are hundreds, and we just actually published a paper showing 100 people who all have documented improvement, where we have cognitive testing before, cognitive testing after, and some of these people also had quantitative EEGs that showed improvement. Others also had MRI volumetrics, so actually looking at volumes of their hippocampus in their brains, showing improvement. So it's been many at this point, and a growing number.
Well, we know that your first research, which was published, dealt with 19 success stories. Recently, you published another paper that had 100 success stories, but you say thousands of people are on your protocol. Talk about some of them.
Right, and we don't have data on all of them because we've trained now over 1,500 physicians in 10 different countries and all over the U.S. So some of these people aren't telling us necessarily before and after on everyone. But we have, as you said, thousands of people on this. We have recently a person, for example, from overseas who went from a MoCA score of 3. And to give you an idea what that means, MoCA goes from 0 to 30. Normally, you would have scores typically 28, 29, 30, and it tests your memory and it tests your understanding of, naming animals, drawing a clock, things like that, repeating sentences, remembering things for several minutes, things like that. And this person scored a 3, which means very late stage. The average for all Alzheimer's patients is 16.2. So this person was very far, and actually she's now scoring at 20. So this is a huge change, and we see this. And of course, we don't see it in every single person, and that's one of the things we're trying to understand. Why do some people do so well and some people not do as well? We do know coming in earlier is better. Starting earlier is definitely better. But we're seeing improvements in speech, improvements in memory, improvements in engagement, interaction, all sorts of things.
And you say Sally, who is a wonderful success story, her score is also still very high and has been very high for a number of years.
Right. So she started out with a 24, which is MCI. So that's on the way to Alzheimer's, and very clearly had abnormalities, as well as had a PET scan that showed definitively that she had Alzheimer's disease. And her score is now perfect 30.
Wonderful. And, your Alzheimer's protocol is doing so well when at the same time we see that some of these Alzheimer's drugs are failing. Is there any other hope out there?
It's a good point. And of course, aducanumab was the big hope that we all had. And that just failed a few weeks ago. So there hasn't been anything. And part of the problem here is that what our research shows is that what is actually driving the phenomenon of Alzheimer's, which typically the doctors are not checking, unfortunately, is that there are many things, from insulin resistance to leaky gut to systemic inflammation, for example, to toxin exposure. These all play a role. And for most people, it's multiple. And of course, a drug only gets at one of these things. It doesn't get at all of them. So it's really important to look at the actual root causes of the problem. And then if you have several, you want to address all of those. So our hope is that in the future, the drugs, which I think are going to be very helpful ultimately, would be tested on the backbone of a program that addresses the actual cause. Because right now, of course, the doctor isn't giving you something that actually addresses the cause of your Alzheimer's.
And you're seeing people develop Alzheimer's at younger ages than ever before, right?
I have been so surprised to see that. When I was training, we were typically seeing people who were in their 70s and 80s. Now we are routinely seeing people who are in their 50s who are developing Alzheimer's. In fact, it's so surprising that often they'll think, well, this can't be Alzheimer's because I'm too young. We even see people in their 40s sometimes.
All right, well, so these people do need to get tested. So when we come back, Dr. Bredesen is going to tell us how to get that all-important cognoscopy. Stay with us. Welcome back to Healthy Living, and we're talking to Dr. Dale Bredesen, founder of the Bredesen protocol, which reverses Alzheimer's symptoms, and you've been experiencing tremendous success with about 3,000 patients so far. And the first step to becoming enrolled in the Bredesen protocol is to take a cognoscopy, which is a test that measures your cognitive state. Can you tell us about how people can get one of those tests?
Sure. We all know that when we turn 50, we should have a colonoscopy. And same idea here. Typically, we recommend when people reach 45 or over, especially if there's any family history of dementia, then you get what we call a cognoscopy. And that simply means a series of blood tests that will look at the root causes of cognitive decline. And then we pair that with a simple online cognitive assessment. Because some people, because this is something that comes on so insidiously, people won't know. In fact, as an example, we just had a person who came in saying, I'm here for some prevention, and it's just, it's in my family history, and it turned out she scored only a 23 on her MoCA, so she's already well into MCI and on her way to Alzheimer's. She also turned out to have a genetic predisposition. She's scoring 30 again. She's doing great.
Wonderful.
Very well. So it can sneak up on you. So we recommend that you get that, and you can get it actually now direct to you. It's easily done. You can get it on drbredesen.com. You can also go to a trained physician who does this and ask them to do it as well.
So folks should go to drbredesen.com, and will they be able to find out if there is a trained physician in the Bredesen protocol near them in their area?
They will, exactly. And there also, I should mention, there's also a new clinic that's opening in Dallas that is focusing on this protocol, and the tests can also be done there. So it just depends on how you want to do it.
And so many people say, I don't want to know if I have Alzheimer's or if I'm going to get Alzheimer's because there's nothing that you can do about it, and it's just going to make me depressed. But really, that's the absolute wrong way to look at it.
Everything is flipping around now because in the past, as you said, everyone told you don't find out because there's nothing you can do about it. And in fact, it's the opposite of that. You want to start as early as possible. So please don't wait. The worst thing that happens if you go in early is they say, oh, it's not Alzheimer's after all. You've got some minor memory problems. We can deal with that anyway. So we now see people early on, virtually everybody gets better. The longer you wait, the harder it is. Now, we do see people, we've had people with MoCA scores of 0 improve, which is fantastic, but that's the exception, not the rule. Whereas the people early on, it's pretty much everybody.
So you really don't want to encourage people, who are like, oh, my grandfather's 85, he has full-blown Alzheimer's, he doesn't recognize us. That's not the ideal patient. So
what I tell people who say that sort of thing, especially people, well, my father's in a nursing home, a late stage, I say bring in all the children. Let's make sure that it ends, and it should end with this generation.
Oh, yes, that's right. It's hard to believe that Alzheimer's could be eradicated. I mean, it's just been such a part of our lives, but we've seen other diseases that were so insidious and they've gone away.
Absolutely. So you look at the scourges of the past, the biblical scourge of leprosy, such an issue in those times. And of course, when I was a very small boy, polio was an issue, and of course, then the Sabin and Salk vaccines came out. We are in the beginning of a time where this will become a rare disease, Alzheimer's. And I think about my daughter who got married last year, and I think, in her lifetime now, as she's an adult, this will not be the scourge it was for my generation, because it should be decrease, 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 as we're now seeing the first people getting better.
That is the hope. So folks need to get that cognoscopy. Go to drbredesen.com and get that cognoscopy. And when they get the results back from the cognoscopy, it will tell them where their weak areas are, and then their treatment is sort of tailor-made for them, right? And what are some of the things that people need to do when they get their protocol?
So that's a really good point. If you go in today to a typical place and say, I'm having trouble with my memory, they won't actually check the very things that could be contributing to your cognitive decline. So it's critical to check that. So number one, you want to know, are there things that are giving you ongoing systemic inflammation? Things like leaky gut, things like an undiagnosed infection, things like poor dentition, things like poor diet. All of these things can contribute. So we want to know if you have inflammation, and then we want to remove the source of that, and we want to resolve the inflammation and prevent future inflammation, because that actually has a direct signal to the brain toward Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's really has turned out to be a protective response to these different insults. So that's one of the insults. The second thing is if you have any what we call glyco toxicity, so pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes, These things are strong contributors to Alzheimer's disease. And then the next thing is any sort of deficiency in nutrients, in hormones, or in trophic factors. These are growth factors for your brain. These are all critical because it makes it so that you can't support the neural network that is in your brain, which is a huge network. You have almost a quadrillion synapses.
Wow.
And then finally, various toxins. So these are all critical, and they can all be identified and addressed.
Wonderful. I mean, this is just such a hopeful message, but we need to do our part as well. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Dr. Bredesen is going to talk about some of those key points of the Bredesen protocol, which we should all be doing for brain health. So stay with us. Welcome back, and we're continuing our discussion with Dr. Dale Bredesen and drilling down on the points of the Bredesen protocol. There are about 36 or more contributing factors to Alzheimer's, you have discovered, and so you have to kind of touch on each one of these when you attempt to reverse the symptoms in people. And you said that sugar intake and diabetes is a huge issue when it comes to Alzheimer's.
Yeah, it's been surprising, actually, because we don't think of sugar as being a cause of Alzheimer's disease. But in fact, it is an important contributor. And there are, unfortunately, about 80 million Americans who have what we call insulin resistance. And what that means is you've taken in enough sugar over your lifetime that you've had to put out large amounts of insulin to counter that. And insulin is not only important for dealing with sugar, but it's also an important supportive factor for your brain. So as you become resistant to the very insulin that your brain needs, in fact, you start downsizing your brain. So you need to get back the insulin sensitivity, and that's one of the parts of our protocol.
So we need to really try to reduce that sugar intake and those simple carbohydrates like the white bread.
Right.
But what I found really fascinating is the importance of our gut health. All those bacteria in our intestines have an enormous impact on our brain health.
Yeah, surprising. In fact, they have impact on everything from your mood to your ability to remember and things like that. So it's interesting how important the bacteria in your gut actually are, and the leakiness of the gut. Unfortunately, not only can you damage bacteria, for example, every time you take antibiotics, you really should be taking probiotics afterwards to restore the optimal bacteria. They work with you to give you the appropriate chemicals. And then you want to make sure that the gut is actually sealed up so that you don't have leakiness from the very food and fragments of bacteria that you are now ingesting. And that turns out to be important. And then another critical thing is actually getting into what's called mild ketosis. It's actually helpful to support your brain with ketones that are made by breaking down fat. So breaking down your fat and staying away from the sugar actually turns out to be helpful.
So diet is enormously important, but a lot of folks don't understand the impact of toxins.
Right.
And we're talking about things that we face every day, like the fumes when we pump our gas, the smells from those candles that we burn.
Yes.
Talk about some of the toxins that we need to be careful about. Mold, I think you mentioned.
Right. So there are three classes of these. Number one is metals and other inorganics. So things like mercury that are in fish, the large fish, so shark and tuna fish and things like that, swordfish. These have a lot of mercury in them, and that can be very damaging. If you've got dental amalgams, that turns out also those can be leached into your system. So having your mercury level checked is actually a helpful thing to do. The second group is organic ones, as you mentioned. Things like burning candles turn out to be surprising. They're filled with benzene and toluene and things like that. So if you're going to do a lot of paraffin candle burning, switch over maybe to some beeswax candles and things like that.
And what about the air fresheners and the plug-ins and things that smell good? What about perfume that women wear and men?
Right, and so there's a thing called the Environmental Working Group. They can help you with telling you what things are helpful. There's also a little app called Think Dirty. You can look to see what's actually in your various products. And then the third group, I should say, are the mycotoxins. These are the ones, the biotoxins made by organisms. And as you mentioned, molds, certain molds, not all molds make this, but Stachybotrys is a bad one, Penicillium, Aspergillus, there are certain ones. So if you've got toxic black mold in your house, get it checked out and see if you need to be remediated and spend more time outdoors.
All right, great information. Well, when we come back, Dr. Bredesen will answer your questions. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Healthy Living. And some of you wrote in on Facebook for Dr. Bredesen to answer some questions. Melissa says, is forgetfulness in old age normal? And how do you know it's Alzheimer's?
So there is often a slight amount of forgetfulness, but in fact, we tend to accept, because this is such a common problem, we tend to accept this a bit too much. People are, many, very sharp if they're doing the right things, if they're not compromising themselves. In fact, they do very well. Now, you can, if you really want to know for sure, you can have a PET scan, or you can actually have a spinal tap and check your cerebrospinal fluid. But the fact of the matter is, no matter what's causing you to have a poor memory, you want to deal with that. And in fact, the approach that we take works well also for people who do not have Alzheimer's. You're still going to optimize your cognition through changes in your metabolism and exposure to toxins, et cetera.
David writes, is the shocking of the brain for Alzheimer's working? Have you heard anything about the trials where they remove the plaques around the brain with a laser? And is there any truth about plaques from the gums going to the brain?
So here's the thing. It is true, the bacteria that are associated with poor dentition, and these are specifically something called P. gingivalis and F. nucleatum, it's two different bacteria. These are actually found. They've been identified in the brains of patients with Alzheimer's. Now, this isn't for every case, but in fact, again, it's another way to have that inflammatory process. So the idea of removing, looking at those is fine. Right now, there's no simple way to look to see if those are in your brain. But again, if you do the right things, you are going to have better dentition. You're going to have less inflammation. Now, as far as removing the plaques, here's the problem with this. There have been some studies trying to, quote, break up plaques. It's not the plaques themselves that are the damage. It's the little fragments of them that are there to counter the ongoing bacteria. And therefore, breaking them up doesn't make a huge sense. What we want to do is get rid of the cause and then slowly remove them.
Well, this has been fascinating. Thank you, Dr. Bredesen, for being here today. And thank you also for the 30 years of research that's gone into developing the Bredesen protocol. We look forward to your book in 6 months. And again, we're so glad that you joined us today.
Thank you, Lori.
And thank you for joining us as well. I'm Lori Johnson. Thanks for joining us for Healthy Living, and we'll see you again next time.